The school bell screams through the crowded cafeteria, a harsh reminder of duty. Yasmin corners Layla by the cold metal lockers, blocking her path with a stern gaze.
Assalamu alaikum, bestie.
Wa alaikum assalam.
We have a Quran lesson today. Don't forget again.
I will make it. I have been distracted with schoolwork, she mutters, her voice barely a whisper. Yasmin steps closer, invading her space.
Is it schoolwork? Or is it Nick?
Layla freezes, the silence between them heavy with unspoken judgment. I don't know what you want me to say. I'm only helping him with schoolwork.
I've known you since we were kids. I've never seen you like this over a boy. I told you to forget about him. Why do you keep talking to him?
I'm only helping him. We are just friends, she says defensive.
When a man and a woman are alone together, the third one is shaitan. You are inviting trouble you cannot handle.
Yasmin walks away without a backward glance, her final words drifting over her shoulder like a warning. Her face flushed. She refused to acknowledge the warning, choosing instead to stare blankly at the wall of lockers. The hallway emptied, leaving Layla standing in the sudden, ringing silence of the locker bay. She exhaled, her shoulders dropping as she reached for her locker combination. The metal door groaned open, but before she could stash her books, a shadow fell across the opening. She turned, and there was Nick, leaning casually against the adjacent locker, his presence sudden and jarring.
"Hello there,"
he said, his voice dropping into a register that made the air feel thinner. Layla jumped, the textbook slipping from her fingers and hitting the floor with a dull thud. She bent to retrieve it, her pulse quickening. Nick did not move to help. Instead, he watched her, his smile tight and unreadable.
"You look like you have seen a ghost."
Layla gripped the handle of her locker, her knuckles white.
"You are invited to a party tonight at 9.
He said, the words cutting through her hesitation. Layla straightened, her grip tightening on the book. My parents will never allow it, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Nick pushed off the locker, closing the distance between them until he stood just inches away. He brushed his hand against the metal door, blocking her only exit path.
"They will be fine,"
he said, his tone dismissive.
"You are not a child, Layla. Stop living like one."
He turned to walk away, pausing only to glance back.
"Just stay for 1 hour. Wear something nice."
He vanished around the corner, leaving the space saturated with the weight of the choice he had just forced upon her. The bedroom door clicked shut, sealing out the noise of the house. Layla paced the small room, her footsteps muffled by the rug. She checked her watch. The time for the lesson had passed. A heavy, hollow sensation settled in her gut. She could already hear the disappointment in the voice of Yasmin. Yasmin is going to be so angry at me. She crossed to the center of the room and stopped, her hands hovering in the air. The mirror caught her gaze. She stepped closer, the glass reflecting a face she barely recognized in the dim light. Her fingers moved toward her head, trembling. She gripped the fabric, pulling it taut, then released it, her breath hitching. She turned away, pacing back to the wall, then returned to the mirror. This time, she grabbed the edges of the fabric with both hands, knuckles turning pale. She stared into her own eyes, searching for a version of herself that felt solid. The room felt smaller with every passing second. She reached up again, her fingers fumbling with the pins, then jerked her hands away as if burned. She backed into the bed and sat down, staring at the empty wall. The silence was absolute. She was paralyzed, caught in the friction between who she had been and who she was suddenly terrified to become. Layla lunged toward her wardrobe, yanking the doors open with a sharp, frantic motion. She pushed aside the familiar, modest tunics and scarves, letting them slide to the floor in a heap. All my clothes are boring. None are appropriate for this kind of party. Her hands moved with a sudden, jagged urgency. She pulled a tight black dress from the very back of the closet, the fabric cool and unforgiving against her palms. She discarded her usual head covering, replacing it with a leopard print piece, winding it loosely. She stood before the mirror, her breath hitching as she processed the change. The person staring back looked like a stranger, the lines of the dress clinging to her frame in ways that made her skin prickle. She reached up to adjust the fabric, her fingers trembling, then stopped mid-motion. The weight of the decision settled in her chest, a heavy, cold anchor of betrayal that fought against a strange, sharp pulse of rebellion. Should I take my hijab off? It would hurt my parents if I did that. Am I wearing my hijab for the sake of my parents or for the sake of Allah? I am already disobeying Allah. Why am I doing this? She did not look away. She stared at the reflection, testing the silence of the room, waiting for a sign that never came. She was no longer who she had been 10 minutes ago, and the transformation felt both inevitable and irreversible. The phone on the bed buzzed, a sharp rhythmic vibration that cut through the room. Layla did not hesitate.
I am outside your house.
She crossed the floor, grabbed a brown leather jacket, and pulled it over her shoulders. She stepped into the hallway, her movements stiff. The house was quiet, the air thick with a stillness that made every floorboard creak under her weight. She reached the front door, placed her hand on the cold handle, and twisted. Outside, the night air hit her like a physical blow, damp and biting. Nick stood by his car, the engine idling with a low, steady thrum. As she approached, his eyes moved over her, tracing the lines of her silhouette. A slow, thin smirk pulled at his mouth.
You look nice,
he said, his voice dropping into a low register. The words landed with a strange, heavy impact, a validation that washed away the lingering doubt in her chest. She felt the pulse of the engine through the soles of her shoes. Nice? Are you sure? She whispered, the question barely audible. Nick opened the door, gesturing for her to enter. She slid into the passenger seat, the leather cool against her skin, and looked back at the house one last time before he pulled away from the curb. The car slowed, then cut its engine. The silence that followed was immediate. The heavy front door swung open, and sound spilled out like a physical force. They arrived to the house party. She immediately feels very uncomfortable. The air was thick with the scent of stagnant smoke and cheap perfume, clinging to her throat. She pulled her brown leather jacket tighter around her frame, fingers digging into the fabric to steady her shaking hands. Everywhere she looked, people moved in jagged, rhythmic motions that felt alien to her. She drifted toward a corner, putting her back against the cool, damp drywall. The light flashed, catching the faces of strangers who stared straight through her. Nick looks at her.
Don't worry, I'm here. Just enjoy your time,
He shouted over the noise. She looked at him, then back at the swirling crowd. the crushing weight of her own visibility suddenly becoming impossible to ignore. The music hit a jagged peak, then surged again. Sarah pushed through the writhing mass of bodies with a predatory focus. She stopped 3 feet from Layla, her chin tilted up, eyes scanning the room to ensure she had an audience.
What are you doing with her?
The surrounding group stopped moving. A silence rippled outward, heavy and suffocating.
What is she wearing? Who wears a hijab to a party?
Sarah sneered, stepping closer until she occupied all of Layla's field of vision. The room erupted. It started as a low titter, then exploded into a cacophony of jeers and sharp, mocking laughter. Layla felt the heat rise in her face, a burning, stinging sensation that made her skin crawl. Every
You look
eye in the
completely
house was
lost.
fixed on
Not
her.
having fun?
Judging, mocking, stripping away the thin layer of confidence she had built. The laughter did not stop. It grew louder. Layla shoved past a pair of laughing strangers and lunged for the door.
Layla, wait.
The night air hit her like a slap, sharp and biting against her flushed skin. She did not look back. She sprinted down the concrete steps. Her breath came in ragged, painful gasps that burned her throat. Her lungs screaming for air. She realized with a jolt of terror that the street was empty. Layla skidded to a halt under the flickering yellow light of a street lamp. This was a bad idea. Nick will never like me. Her chest heaved, each breath a sharp, metallic sting in her lungs. She reached into her pocket, her fingers trembling as she pulled out the phone. The screen illuminated her face in a harsh, cold glow. A series of notifications from Yasmin crowded the display. She tapped the screen. She opens the messages from Yasmin.
I can't believe you missed the Quran lesson again. You said you'd make it. I saw photos of you with Nick at a party. What happened to you? I don't even recognize you anymore.
Layla reads the messages with her eyes wide. Everyone hates me. She dropped her arm, the phone dangling from her limp fingers. The world began to tilt. A sharp pain bloomed in the center of her chest. She tried to take a step, but her knees surrendered, collapsing on the ground. She hit the pavement hard. She falls unconscious. The street lamp buzzed once, then flickered out, leaving her in total, absolute blackness.